Well, hey friends, welcome back to Fun Ahead TV and welcome to 2025. This is officially the first video kicking off the 2025 year on Fun Ahead TV, and I could not be more excited because today we're firing up a brand new project on this channel. Yeah, you're looking at it. This is an exceptionally super awesome, super clean car. I'm gonna tell you more about it and we're gonna get right into it right now. Let's do it.
Rippin', tearin', the rippin' and the tearin'.
Look at her. She is absolutely beautiful. Not my car, unfortunately. It's another customer car. This car belongs to a very loyal subscriber of Fun Ahead TV. His name is Booker, super awesome guy, and he's become a good buddy of mine as well. And this is his 2002 Porsche 911. Now, before I get into the details about what this car is, any of you astute 911, 996 observers know what exactly we're looking at here? I'll give you a hint. It's not a normal 911 coupe. This is a 996 Targa. Yeah. Now, even you Porsche aficionados out there probably have not seen too many of these because they are a rare bird. More on that in just a second. But for those of you who don't know what this is, you might be wondering, dude, what the heck's a Targa? Well, a Targa is basically a body style that was born in the 1970s when Porsche wanted to take the tops off the 911 and make it convertible. But US crash regulations promptly put the kibosh on that due to the newly implemented rollover crash protection. So as a result, Porsche was allowed to remove the top, but they had to keep the B-pillar, meaning that there was still some structure back behind the driver and passenger so that they wouldn't get crushed in the event of a rollover crash. Now, of course, OEMs have long since been able to meet the rollover crash protection regulations for convertibles, and there is no longer a need for a Targa top. However, it kind of became a thing in the Porsche world. They became kind of an icon, so therefore, Porsche still, to this day, makes a Targa version of the 911. Now, it was a little bit different in the days of the 996 and 997 911. They didn't do the very obvious B-pillar. These cars were a little bit more subtle. Basically, the gist of these is the Targa top meant that there was just a very large sunroof. This roof is entirely glass, basically from right behind the windshield to right behind the driver and passenger. And you're able to completely open this roof and put it all the way back to give you basically a very large sunroof. So not exactly the same thing as what the classic Targas were and what the modern Targas are. Nonetheless, it is a very rare model. They made just over 5,000 996 Targas of a 170,000 unit model run, I believe, meaning that a measly 3% of the entire 996 model run were Targas, making this one very rare bird. And we're working on it, and I could not be more excited. This particular Targa is in just absolutely immaculate shape. Sure, it has a few little blemishes here and there because every 20-plus-year-old car does, but it only has 46,000 miles on the clock, something like that. Extremely low mileage car, been very well taken care of in its lifetime, and we get to do a mechanical refresh on this bad girl, and I could not be more excited. So, enough blabbering on my part. Let's go ahead and get into this thing. We need to get it on the lift, and we'll talk a little bit more about just what the heck it is we're gonna do to her. Well, all right, now that we've got her racked, let me be the first to officially introduce you to Project Tight Targa.
Tight.
Why is it Tight Targa? Well, first of all, it's a working title, very much a working title. I might change it, but this thing's just freaking tight. Everything about it, cosmetically and hopefully mechanically, is in insanely good shape. This thing is freaking tight.
Tight, yeah!
But only time will tell as to whether or not this thing is mechanically tight, which segues perfectly into what the heck are we doing to this thing? Well, we're doing basically a light mechanical restoration. Engine and transmission out. While we have it out, we're gonna do quite a bit of the while you're in there. So we're doing an IMS bearing, of course. We're going to do a lot of the top end of the engine, not top end cylinder head wise, intake manifolds and everything. Replace a lot of those things. Rubbers and plastics, basically, is gonna be the name of the game, as always. We're gonna inspect the clutch, pressure plate, and flywheel. It wasn't done too terribly long ago on this car, but we are just gonna go ahead and put our peepers on it real quick, make sure that we can throw those parts back up and in it. Obviously, those do have to come off in order to get access to the IMS bearing anyway, so in the event that they need replaced, perfect time to do that. In addition, it seems like Booker's car has a pretty serious rear main seal leak. Whether or not that's actually coming from the rear main seal or the IMS flange, we'll find out in a little bit here, but he's got a pretty bad oil leak coming from the engine. We'll look at that in just a minute when we do an underside inspection. So we've got a handful of oil leaks to remedy along the way. We're not, for once, doing timing chain guides. Surprising, considering that's basically been the focal point of the past several projects that we've done on this channel. This is the M96 I forget the exact number. Basically, this is the first iteration of the 3-chain timing chain M96, meaning that it didn't have the 5 chains, and it is on the 4th and 5th chains of the M96 engines that had the really, really bad catastrophic issues with the timing chain variocam pads. These guys right here, the ones that got these super deep gouges in them. These engines, fortunately, did not have that timing chain guide setup. They don't have these little pads. They changed up the design pretty significantly when they went from the 5-chain to the 3-chain iteration of these engines. And due to the fact that they have the larger primary chains going out to each cylinder head, well, they no longer needed these little pads, and they could take care of it with the big pads, which, as we saw in the past several projects, basically they'll get a little bit of wear, but no significant amount of wear, nothing like this right here. So we'll get into more details as we progress along with the project, but for now, just know main things: intermediate shaft bearing, we're gonna inspect the clutch pressure plate flywheel, we're gonna do a lot of the gaskets and seals on the top of the engine, and we're gonna inspect along the way for any kind of catastrophic problems that could be developing with this engine. Hopefully there are none, but time will tell. So, enough blabbering. Let's go ahead and get this thing up in the air and do a quick underside inspection. I'll show you guys that leak that I'm talking about. Well, here we are. So, right off the bat, boom. That's what I'm talking about. This thing definitely has a fairly, prevalent oil leak. I won't say it's like super serious. There's not like crazy amounts of drips everywhere. But it's not great. And as you can see, this oil leak has been going on for quite some time. As you can see, all of that residue up on the side of the bell housing of the transmission there. So this thing has definitely been there for a while. And looking up towards the AOS, you can hopefully be able to see that it does appear like the AOS is leaking, which is very common. These things do get oil leaks up and around them. So we'll be able to tell for sure exactly what that oil leak is. Obviously, once we have the engine down and out of the car, that should be getting remedied as well. Aside from those oil leaks though, everything looks pretty dang good under here. This thing does have an aftermarket exhaust, some soot leaking out of the exhaust pipes here. That is kind of a lot of soot, but hopefully nothing too serious going on internally. We are going to be sending off an oil sample to Blackstone to be able to find out whether or not we've got anything internally going wrong with this engine. Hopefully nothing comes back to show that there's any level of bore score, but this engine is one of the ones that is kind of prone to have that happen over time.
What do I do?
We've got a short shifter kit, that's pretty cool. And I could tell just from moving the car in and out of the shop, shuffling it onto the lift, that that shifter does in fact feel freaking awesome. Plus the fact that this car is just so low mileage, you can just feel how fresh everything is inside of that shifter. This car is very nice. Booker did recently replace the struts in this thing, so you can see these brand new Bilsteins on all 4 corners. Bushings for the control arms don't look too terribly bad. Overall, this thing, yeah, is in pretty solid shape. It was a Michigan car before it came to Ohio, which is never a good sign as far as rust goes, but I don't see much rust on this thing. Clearly, whoever owned it didn't drive it much in the winter, so hopefully we don't end up coming across too many rusty bolts along the way. I mean, one way to tell pretty quickly is looking at the exhaust bolts, and these don't look too terribly bad. Got a little bit of a mystery leak going on right here. It kind of looks like coolant to me. There is that little access plate for the that coolant duct manifold up inside the block right there. Those tend to leak and be quite problematic, so we'll inspect to see if it seems like the coolant leak is coming from that or if it's coming from something higher up. So overall, I would say this thing definitely passes the old underbody inspection check. So I'm gonna start by dropping the oil out of this bad girl because, like I said, we are sending off a sample to Blackstone and the oil is still nice and warm, which is prime for taking a sample. Then we can start doing the rest of the stuff we need to do to get this engine and transmission up and out of this bad girl. All right, just as a quick update. As you can see, we are currently draining the coolant out of the primary coolant manifold. There's just that little drain plug that lets most of the coolant out of the block. Of course, we're gonna have to release even more coolant once we drop the actual coolant hoses going to and from the water pump, thermostat, to and from the engine, etc. I did also go ahead and drain the oil out of the engine. We took our oil sample. That's now ready to be sent off to Blackstone. Hopefully we'll get some solid, very positive results from that. But just right off the bat, the oil did look good. It looked dirty, but it was overall clean of metals. I went ahead and looked down in the bottom of the oil filter canister. Normally, if there's any amount of debris, like metal debris, you can see it, and there's a magnet in the bottom of it. You can see some amount of metal in there. There was none, so that's great. I also looked through all of the pleats of the oil filter as well. I didn't cut it open, but I could just tell with my quick litmus test of looking through each of the pleats that there was nothing inside of that oil filter that is concerning whatsoever, just oil. We did see a little bit of ferrous metals on the drain plug. This engine does have an Ellen Engineering magnetic drain plug. Of course, that's to be expected. You're gonna see a little bit usually, but there was no amount of like furry metal, if you know what I mean. If you see a lot of dust on a magnet, then it really kind of starts to grow out. It was only on the very, very surface of it. So based on visual checks, everything seems to pass, but we'll find out for sure as far as the internal health of this engine from an oil analysis standpoint once we get that sample back from Blackstone. I'm gonna go ahead and continue to just take things off the bottom of the engine, disconnect the coolant hoses. We gotta remove the bumper. We've got to start up on top of the engine, remove the intake, begin removing the AC compressor. I got to get undercovers, cross braces, you know, you name it. All the things need to come off. So I got to just buckle down and do that for a little bit. We'll talk soon. Well, friends, here we are just a couple of hours later, and I've made quite a bit of progress. We got all the undercovers off, disconnected all of the coolant hoses, removed every single one of the primary cross members, disconnected the CV shafts from the transmission output shaft flanges. So we made a lot of progress. Unfortunately, some of that was kind of slower moving progress, i.e. disconnecting the CV shafts. It's always a pain in the butt, but it's very important to take your time, use heat, use whatever you need to do to get every single one of those bolts off and not freaking rounded, because Porsche insisted on using Allen bolts on a very high torque bolt. Very easy to round those off, and if you do, you're gonna be in a world of hurt. So it's very important to just take your time doing that. It took me about, I would say right around an hour to get all 12 of the CV shaft bolts off, but it's absolutely worth putting that much time into it, because otherwise you're gonna end up spending a ton of time figuring out how to extract a rounded off Allen head bolt. So we made quite a bit of progress today. I feel really good about it, and it was just day one. Booker literally dropped this car off like 5 hours ago. So feels good. Hopefully by the end of tomorrow, we will have the engine and transmission out of this vehicle, and then we can really start ripping on this thing, making some progress towards doing this mechanical restoration. Well, howdy, and good morning, or actually, good afternoon, dang it. It is officially time to start cranking on this hog. And by that, I mean, today, we are going to go ahead and get this engine and transmission out of this vehicle, see what we're working with here. So like I said, I got most of the things disconnected on the underside yesterday. Just have a few more little odds and ends to take care of underneath. And then we're going to go ahead and begin focusing on the upper side. Quite a few things up here just to disconnect. The underside's definitely the more labor intensive one. A lot of things under there to take care of. The upper side can have its challenges though as well. AC compressor can be one of those things that you end up wrestling with way too much. Just a handful of things that are just hard to access. But anyway, enough blibber blabbing. Let's start turning some wrenches. Well, as you can see, we've made some progress. Everything should be good to go. As you can see, we did have to remove the bumper, primarily just because the exhaust needs to get up and around the heat shields that kind of cup around the bottom of the exhaust on either side. One thing I still do obviously have to do is remove the power steering lines, but those are much easier to do once you've gotten yourself a few inches of clearance. So I will disconnect those once we start dropping the engine a little bit. As you can see, we've got our carts setting there, ready to catch our engine and transmission. Yeah, the only thing left to do now is loosen up some mounts.
Yeah. Tight. Tight, tight. Tight. Yeah. Tight. Tight, tight. Tight.
Well, friends, and there you have it. The engine and transmission out of Booker's super tight 996 Targa.
Tight, tight, tight.
And now that we have the engine and transmission officially out of it, we can begin starting the real work of getting into this thing, which we will do in the next episode. For today, I just kind of wanted to introduce this project, show you guys this amazing car, and obviously do the grunt work to take this engine out so we can do what we truly need to do on this thing. While we're on the note of talking about working on cars, I have decided to go a fish legit with my side hustle of working on Porsche's. Water-cooled restoration is the name of my company. It's official. If you or someone you know has an M96 or M97 powered Porsche that you would like to have some major mechanical service done to, and you would like to have your car featured on Fun Ahead TV, well then go ahead and shoot me an email at funaheadtvofficial@gmail.com and we can go ahead and chit chat about the possibility of getting you on the books. So that's all I'm doing with regards to the shameless plug. It's over, it's officially over. But I am so excited to get into this thing and start doing some super satisfying restoration of this thing. All of those gaskets and seals and IMS bearing, it's getting replaced. And I can't wait to see what this IMS bearing looks like. You know, they always say if you drive them more, they're in better shape. If you don't drive them as much, they're not in as good shape. We'll see if that's true with this thing. So we could potentially be seeing some serious IMS bearing carnage in the very next episode when we pull this thing out. So thank you all so much for being here today. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. And please subscribe to see even more super awesome Porsche content and just general automotive content coming down the pipeline to you via Fun Ahead TV every single week. Please hit that subscribe button, super easy and helps out my channel massively. So thank you again so much for being here today. I appreciate each and every one of you. Yes, you, I'm looking right at you, and I will see you all hopefully in next week's episode. See ya.
Rippin', tearing, the ribbon